Hey there, let's talk about adding vectors. In general, we can add vector b to vector a by placing the tail of b to the tip of a. The resultant a plus b vector goes from the origin to the tip of b. Let's talk about this in some detail. Vector a has a magnitude and direction. We can move it anywhere as long as we keep those two things intact. Here we've moved it to the origin and resolved it into components. It has an x component and a y component. Vector a is the vector sum of ax times the x hat vector, which is a unit vector lying in the x direction, and ay times the unit vector y hat. We can find the magnitude of vector a by taking the square root of the sums of the squares of the components. In this case, it would be 6.4 units. We can find the angle of vector a by recognizing that the tangent of theta is the opposite over adjacent, which is ay over ax in this case. Now, if we add a vector b, we can bring that down to where the tail of b is at the tip of a and resolve b into components. Our b vector in this case has an x component of 1 and a y component of -2 because it's pointing in the downward direction. To find the resultant vector, we start at the origin and go to the tip of b. The magnitude of the resultant vector is, again, the square root of the sum of the squares of the components. This time we've added the x components of the a and b vector and the y components of the a and b vector. We can also find the angle by recognizing that the tangent of theta is the opposite over adjacent, or ay plus by over ax plus bx. If we want to subtract a vector, we're really just adding the negative of the vector, so we would multiply b vector by -1 over both of its components. We do the same thing. We can find the magnitude of a minus b by taking the square root of the sums of the squares of the components. And recognizing that tangent theta is opposite over adjacent, we can find the angle of the vector. In general, graphically, we place the tail of the second vector to the tip of the first and the resultant vectors from the origin to the tip of the second vector. Mathematically, what we do is resolve the vectors into components, then add the components of the vectors to find the magnitude and the angle of the vectors. To subtract one vector from another, we do the same thing, only we're adding the negative of the vector. In general, the magnitude is the square root of the sum of the squares of the components. The tangent of the angle is opposite over adjacent. This can be generalized to 3 dimensions and can be generalized to more than 2 vectors. Thank you kindly for coming. See you again soon.